Finding and living your dream. What is that? I mean, how do you do that? How do you find your dream? How do you know what you want to do? How can you even get an understanding of what that is? Is it just innate wisdom, or can you create a foundation that enables you to connect at a deeper level to what your purpose is in life? And then living your dream. I mean, what is that? Is it, going from party to party, or is it connection with others? What is living your dream? What does it really mean? Let's explore how we do that. How do we find what our dream is, and how do we live our dream? As I have a conversation with JD Schramm.
Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
G'day, JD. Great to see you again. You looking well?
Thank you, Damien. Great to see you as well. And I guess we're maybe, I don't know, about a third of the way into the year that is unfolding in front of us. It's good to get to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a while, and lots has happened. I know you got a lot on your plate, and you've been fairly busy. Same here. I've been pretty full on. Yeah, I was actually recently just appointed as CEO of another organization. It's not full time for me, but it's a big it's a strategic plan from my end. An opportunity came up, and I'm now the CEO of a radio station. Oh, there you go.
Wow. Because you had copious amounts of free time that you could certainly take on, one
Well,
more responsibility like that.
isn't it always the way where if you want something done, give it to a busy person? But then again, I couldn't have. I'm relaunching because I do it with corporates. I have a program called Max Time. It's part of
Uh-huh.
exceptional effort. Yeah, so I've got exceptional effort, which part of that is max time, which is what I call ROE, return on effort. And
Ooh, I
I
like
wouldn't
that.
be able to do I can't really claim that that's a project for, or a program for helping people get a lot done if I'm not actually doing a lot myself. So maybe I'm just trying to prove that I can push the limit. So yeah, what I'm saying is can be done.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's really
Um,
exciting. But that kind of links to what we were going to talk about, and what from your perspective as well. We're talking about finding and living your dream, because I think both of us, we didn't start that way. I know I didn't start with having a dream. It wasn't, and I know there's that famous quote of I have a dream. I know I didn't have that, and when I was at school, I didn't really know why I was at school, other than that's just what you did.
yeah.
And yeah, I was good at school, I think, because when I was younger, when we'd come home, my mum would give us, myself and my sister, I had a sister one year younger. She'd give us copious amounts of homework. So we'd get home, and it wouldn't be school homework. She'd give us all these extra homework. So we'd come home, we'd have to sit at the table, the kitchen table, and she'd give us this homework. We had to do it. And it was old school type thing where it was almost wrap your knuckles if you didn't do it properly or you mucked around. So I was ahead of school in the sense of I did really well because I'd had all that extra training. And then, when my parents split up, that kind of went out the window, and I didn't do that. And eventually it caught up because I wasn't studying anymore. And the schoolwork was moving ahead, but I wasn't keeping up. And it got to the point where I was failing miserably at school, and even to avoid my dad finding out that I was failing, I near the end of the school, when it was about to where exams and that was going to start. I said I want to switch schools because I want to do different topics, and they didn't have at the school I was at, which resulted in me going back a year. But at the same time too, my dad didn't find out that I was going to fail all these classes because I moved school before that happened. But I didn't have a direction. I didn't have any thoughts. So what was your life? What were you like when you were younger? Is it this? What did you have
But
this big dream, or did you? Yeah.
it's funny. I did have lots of dreams.
Mm,
None of them do I think I really lived into,
yeah.
and yet on some level, I guess I have. If you don't care about the form that the
Mm,
dream takes, I
mm,
think the feeling, the emotion, the experience of living the dream is what I have.
yeah.
So uh, I, I heard it said once that our career trajectory we could have never imagined looking forward,
Mm,
but when we turn around and we look at it backwards, everything makes sense.
mm,
And so the setbacks, the disappointments, the job loss, the unexpected moves, the pandemic,
mm,
all of that, when we're sitting at it looking forward, we're like, what does this mean? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to the world? Why is this happening to my company?
mm,
And yet when we get through it and we look back, we're like, oh yeah, that actually
mm,
set me up for this other thing. Or had
yeah.
this not happened, I wouldn't have been in a place that I could have accepted that.
Mm.
So yeah, I think I am living the dream and I'm doing stuff I never could have imagined.
Oh, wow. Was that a plan? Because I look at it from my perspective, when I was younger, I didn't have that. And I had certain little dreams we wanted, as you were talking about that there, it popped into my head. I remembered a friend and I, he had an old Morris, and I don't know what the equivalent is of in the US, but this old
Is
English
that a
car.
car?
Yeah, it's an old English car, and we talked about
Okay.
racing it, and it's the opposite of anything that you would consider sporty. So I don't know why we were talking about racing it, but we had this idea that we were going to do that, and he's going on about how it's going to do this, and he's talking about with his brother about how it's he's going to drag his brother and stuff like that, and we never did it. It was the short of it. We had this great idea. So I had a number of those type of dreams. Was I'm going to do this, and then when it came to the practical application of it, it was pie in the sky stuff that had no attempt of even coming. It's like me being a jockey I'm 6 foot. It's not going to happen. It was never going to happen.
Yeah.
And so and it wasn't until later, because that was where I wanted to, draw that correlation. Because as you talk about, all these different things happen, and I had that. There was a job that I wanted to work in corporate recovery, and sometimes drawing to what you said there, it was there was a company I really wanted to work for, and I thought everything was great, and I was going to get the job. Had an interview, I was all set, and then I didn't get the job, and I was really upset about it. And drawing from what you had said, I I then after I got myself, I was a bit upset about that, and drank a few things and in my sorrows for a little bit, and then finally pulled myself in. All right, I get up and do it again. And then I got this job with another company, which turned out, as it turned out, and I didn't know at the time, with the first job, was one insolvency is a small area, it's very boutique, and everyone knows everyone. But you don't really know that from the outside unless you know someone on the inside.
Right.
Just
Right.
like an accounting job or something like that. I used to liken it to Richard Gere in Pretty Woman, but I had more hair back then. And because you're taking over companies, breaking them up, that kind of thing. And but when I actually got in there, I found out this first company that I got rejected for was not. I don't know why I got rejected, but they were known as the Dodgy Brothers. They didn't have a great reputation. Now, had I got that job, I would have been tarred with that reputation without even being aware of it. So, like
Yeah.
I was drawing that conclusion to what connection to what you were saying before. Of, sometimes you have these adversities and you're wondering why, but then it comes clear afterwards. Did you have that kind of epiphanies as well as you move forward?
I did. It's fascinating, Damien, because I just wrote a newsletter. One of my goals this year,
Mm.
2023, was to do more outreach, and so I've started an occasional newsletter. I won't say it's weekly because
Mm.
I have a fear of commitment, so it's occasional. But
Yeah.
so far, I've done one every week since January 15th.
Awesome.
Uh, but the one that I wrote this week was, and they're all short. So if
Mm.
anybody wants to just check it out, jdschramm.com, you can subscribe, doesn't cost anything. And they're all under 5-minute read.
Yeah.
The one that I did this week was on the power of an origin story.
Okay.
And I give a simple 5-step framework to share
Mm.
your origin story. And then I shared how I got into teaching. And so this is real prescient for this conversation that we're having right now, Damien. Uh, my the way I got into teaching at the university level is directly tied to 9/11.
Oh, wow.
Um, when 9/11 happened, I was an MBA student at NYU.
Mm.
I was working during the day for an internet startup that was on the ropes. That we weren't. It was touch and go. And then at night, I was going to school getting my MBA. Well, 9/11 happened. Most of my clients were in the World Trade Center. I was in and out
Mhm.
of the World Trade Center 2, 3 times a week. In
Wow.
fact, this isn't in the article. In August, I had lost an argument with my boss
Mm.
to rent space in the World Trade Center for our offices.
Oh, wow.
And I had found a location. It was like one of those WeWork sort of spaces. That's what it was called in 2001. But and so when the towers went down,
Mm.
uh, uh, I lost like my whole book of business was mostly firms in the towers or near there,
Wow.
and everybody's focus in New York City was on everything but online education. Like that was like the last thing that was of importance to them.
Yeah.
And so 9/11 happened on a Tuesday, and on Friday my company let me go. And
Mm.
it's like, talk about a lousy week.
Yeah.
Um, but what I did
Mm.
in light of that is I went to the advising office on campus and I said, so I've only got 4 classes left to graduate. If you let me transfer into the daytime program instead of the evening program, let me take 2 more classes. I'll be
Mm.
done by December.
Yeah.
And they said, well, it's not usually how it happens, but it's a weird world. Yes, you can do it. It was early enough in September. They made the shift.
Yeah.
Well, I fell in love with being on a college campus during the fall of 2001.
Right.
I did an informational interview with one of my favorite professors, Mike Lennox, and I said, how do I get your job? Like, I want to do what you do. And he gave me some awesome advice. And
Yeah.
then sure enough, Damien, he was double scheduled in the spring semester. And
Ah.
they didn't find out until December. And they
Right.
were scrambling to find somebody to step in and teach an 8 a.m. strategy class. And he
Right.
said, go talk to JD. He said he wants to teach.
Yeah.
And had I not been let go,
Mm.
had I not added 2 more classes, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have been eligible to step in and teach. But I had finished as a student in December, stepped into the classroom as a strategy prof in January,
Mm.
got a few more adjunct roles and then a full-time role. And, now 20 years in higher ed teaching at, 5 of the biggest names in the US and loving it.
Yeah.
And that's not how it looked on the Friday after 9/11. It looked really crappy on the Friday after 9/11. So
Yeah.
looking forward, I couldn't have predicted it. Looking
Mm.
backward, that dreadful tragedy was actually a moment for me to pivot, and I didn't know it was that
Mm.
until months later.
And was it connected to, because it sounds like from what I know of your background and what you love is you, I mean, you've done a lot of teaching, and teaching seems to be something like that. When we're talking about finding our dream, was it always something that you wanted to do and you knew you wanted to do, or you needed to discover that teaching was your thing?
It's a really insightful question, Damien. I have always known that I'm an effective communicator.
Mhm.
So in junior high,
Yeah.
which is 12, 13, 14 years old, in the
Mm.
US, I was competing nationally in public speaking contests.
Wow.
And in high school, did a lot of speech and drama, thought I was going to be an attorney, thought maybe I was going to run for public office, but
Mm.
something around speaking.
Yeah.
Ended up getting a college degree in speech and theater, taught theater for a little while,
Mm.
taught speech and theater at a high school for a little while, but ended up realizing that my real gift and where I got the most joy was in the classroom as an educator, which is
Mm.
definitely using public speaking skills, but using more than that. So I didn't at 14 think I would become a college professor
Mm.
or write books on communication, but I knew I would do something around speaking. And
Mm.
and I just so I knew I had this talent that I enjoyed, and that I would figure
Mm.
out where was it that I should apply that. And ended up, finding the work I love to do.
Yeah, I love that. You say you found knew you had this talent that you enjoyed, because I wonder about that a lot. And just for the younger people listening, and some maybe even older, that are wondering, what do I do with my life? What gives me purpose? And I'm just wondering how people find that. Because for me, when I look back, look at some of the things I did. I didn't really have. It was just kind of what seemed great at the time. I learned to become a chef because I knew girls like guys that can cook. That was my first motivation, you know. And way down the list was that I could probably use it as a career, which was, that was down the list. When after I got out of the army, I was fluffing around, and a friend said, "Oh, there's good money up in the mine site." So I went and worked up there without really thinking about it. And then I'm not sure why I wanted to get into corporate recovery. I even worked as a ballroom dance teacher, believe it or not, because it was a great place to go, and at that time there was I got sick of nightclubs, and there was, I was in Perth at the time, and they had there was a ballroom dancing nightclub, but for young people. So they had it set up, and it was done really well.
Huh.
It was a progressive dancing, so you got to you do your little move, and then you switch to the next partner, and they had rings, and there would have been several hundred people in there going around in circles doing it, and you got to meet lots of women. It was great. But then when I came back to Melbourne, I was fluffing around not doing much, and there was an ad for a ballroom dance teacher. I thought, oh, I've got some fundamentals. I'll go and see if they'll take me on that. And I did that for a bit. And that's where, like, for me, that's what I'm trying to work out. I mean, I was always enjoyed giving back and helping people, which is where that a number of things did lead to that. I was working with I was helping out a friend. I met him through my stepdaughter's school, because his daughter went to school with my stepdaughters, and he was setting up, or he had, setting up a foundation to help in the family violence space. And I said, yeah, I'd love to help out with that, and if I can help out at all, let me know. And he did. He did a little proposal, and I volunteered to help
Yeah.
out. And as I was doing that, and they had a proper board and everything there set up, and after about 6 months of volunteering, helping out and doing bits and pieces, the chairman of the board, who was the former chairman and managing director of BP, so he was no slouch, and he said to the founders, he said, "Look, if you really want to be serious about that, you should appoint someone full time to be the CEO and
Yeah.
get it up and running, because it wasn't up and running yet." And so he then tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You've been helping out a lot. You're probably the best person to do that." So I ended up getting paid a substantial amount of money to be the CEO of this organization and get it up and running. And that's where, for me, it was about giving back, but I never really found what it was. I'm trying to think of when that transition happened, that this is what I really want to do. And but that's sorry, you're going to say?
As I listened to you, I wanted to let you finish that thought, but as I listened to you, the desire to help out, the desire to
Mm,
support, do what's needed,
yeah.
was, from your description of it, Damien, it was authentic. It was
Yes.
just, I,
Ah,
I'm interested in what you're doing. Let me know if I can be of any help.
yeah.
If it was a manipulation,
Mm,
if it was, Oh, I know. And I see people in the US, I see people do this in political campaigns.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to volunteer for you in Iowa and go out and knock on doors, but they're doing it because they want a job in the White House. They
Uh,
want a job, in the Senate's office.
yeah.
And so it's a manipulation maneuver,
Mm,
and I think people smell that. I think
yeah.
they can smell that inauthenticity.
Yeah,
But to
definitely.
make a very legitimate, let me know if I can help, and
Mm,
then it turns into something. I think that's great, and it's also, for young, again, for the young people out there listening, or people in career transition listening, uh, if you can afford it, to
mm,
go and intern or volunteer or serve on a board, to do something that allows you to test out
mm,
that industry or that sector or that level of
mm,
service, may be a great way to discern, is this a place that there's a career opportunity for me or not.
mm,
And there are probably a half dozen things that you've done that you didn't get paid for,
mm.
that didn't turn into jobs, and that maybe weren't joy for you. But it's like, yeah, I helped my brother-in-law move. Not really interested in being a mover.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good way to explore, and to find that thing that touches our soul.
Is it
Um,
as simple as that, do you think? Because I mean, I've done a lot of when I was in the army using that example, I had a lot of time off because we worked long days. We actually worked 7-day fortnights. And in that time off, I thought, oh, marketing could be something good. So I went and knocked on all the doors of the marketers in Perth, and I got a job. It was low paying, but I got a job working for a marketing firm because I thought I wanted to, and I got to direct commercials and write, copy for newspaper ads and things like that. And it was a great learning experience. Do you think it is as simple as that when you're talking about the component of finding, excuse me, finding your dream is just trying the different things and seeing what you really like?
yes and no. I think you've got to have some level of exploration and discovery,
Mm,
and trial and error in
yeah.
that regard. But I do think that it's got to be on top of. I love the Jesuit order of Catholic priests, have a very clear distinction of discernment.
Mhm.
It needs to be inside of, or alongside, some very careful discernment. You
Okay.
can't just be shotgun.
Yeah.
I'm going to work in a circus. I'm going to drive an ambulance. I'm going to, be a realtor. I'm going to, cut
Mm,
hair. I'm going to teach school. It can't just be, career ADHD.
mm,
But if you're doing it in a discernment of, can I make a difference here? And does this fulfill me?
ah,
And there, I think then, yeah, we put ourselves out there, and we see what resonates for us, and what we're drawn to.
mm.
I know this is a podcast, so people can't see it, but back behind me, I've got a picture frame with all of my business cards. Now, your younger listeners don't even know what a business card is, because they don't hand out these little pieces of papers anymore.
Yeah.
But I've got every job that I've ever worked, that I've had a business card for. I have it framed, and
Wow.
as I look at that, many times I started out part time,
Mm,
and then was offered a full time opportunity. It
yeah.
happened at the high school where I taught speech and
Mhm.
drama. It
Yeah.
happened with Kaplan Test Prep. It
Mm,
happened at NYU. Um, and so those were places that they began to know my worth
mm,
by the value of what I was contributing. And there's a lot of part-time roles that I've had that didn't turn into something
mm,
that I thought it would. And that's okay. Like,
yeah.
that's how we all explore and find out. And we also have to be sure our needs are met, we're paying our bills, we're taking care of our family.
Mm,
There are times when, like, I get lots of opportunities to serve on boards as a volunteer for a nonprofit, to
mm,
do advising for causes that are important and that need my help. And I've got to be sure at the end of the day, or at the end of the month, I have done enough business that I can pay my bills. I can
Mm,
provide for my family. So I think we do have to be. You kind of have to have both a vision and a dream and a reality of I
mm.
got to be sure I can live in this world as well.
That's a good point. I love what you said there about yeah, having that discernment and the focus of can I make a difference with those statements there, because from my perspective, I was in a part of my life there, I was firmly in that category of what you talked about of career ADHD. And I think because and when you were saying that, the reason that I was in that space was because I did what my approach wasn't. Can I make? I worked in real estate. You mentioned real estate. I worked in a very short period of time. I was drunk a lot, and I was there to try and make a lot of money. And that was
How'd
that
that
was
work
my
out for you?
not very well, not very well at all. But it was an interesting period because that was my motivation. It was, and there was a big program at the time. There was a program about, oh, you can make all this money in real estate, and they had this whole, I won't mention the name of it, but they had this program where, real estate, make all this money, and we got this program that's all authentic, and I was like, oh yeah, cool, this is make money. That's what I want to do. I want to make lots of money. Um, and then we get there, and I think I was the second or third week there, and one of the real estate agents brought in his speedometer, because back in the day when you actually had the mechanical ones, because this was a while ago, and he goes, "Oh, I've just found a new one with a lower kilometers on it." And I'm going, "What?" And he goes, "I'm replacing the speedo on my car, so it looks like I got lower kilometers." And I'm thinking, so there was a part of me that was ethical because I'm just going, I don't, no, I just don't connect with this at all.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
I want to make money, but ripping people off is not the way I want to do it. But I was, because that's why I was interested, because you seem to have that, as you said, you're looking for where you can make a difference. Whereas for me, I really didn't know. I was trying to avoid things. I wanted to. Wasn't happy at school, so I wanted to leave school, and I wasn't allowed to leave school because my dad said I couldn't go unless I had a job. The army recruitment people came around, and they said, "Oh, and I was like, great, I can get out of school." And then I'm in the army, and I'm looking, going running around the bush is not my idea of fun. And just to clarify, we have more than one bush in Australia, even though we call it the bush. We have we have lots of trees. Just clarifying, we might be on this anyway. Um, and that's where I was looking at it, and I was mature enough to realize, because at the end of basic training, you either got one of the very limited jobs that were good,
Yeah,
or everyone else went to infantry. And I was mature enough to recognize that I wasn't going to get one of those really good jobs, um, because I wasn't mature enough. So I was in the middle there somewhere. But the only position that wasn't being taken or no one was putting their name down for was the chef's position. And that's where I went, well, girls like guys that can cook. It's going to get me out of running around
yeah.
that bush. And I could use it as a career. So I was kind of running away from things, I think, and it took me a while before I realized I was always helping out people. I think I told you a story. I was walking through Perth and I had no money, and some Aboriginal guy came and asked me for change. I didn't have any change. I just had a $20 note, and I gave him that. And I didn't have any money in my bank account or a job. And for whatever reason, I gave it to him. Which he danced around. Well, first he didn't believe it. He's looking at it, but then he started dancing around. And I was just sitting there watching it, and it was a wonderful feeling. And the next day, I got a call for a position, and I got the job. And I do wonder whether my mood was different because of that, and that's why I got the job.
Yeah.
But I was just wondering, so we're talking about finding, your dream, and it's like I didn't, I didn't really, and I'm looking at going, I didn't have any dreams. I'm trying to, well, I had dreams, but maybe I didn't think they were achievable. And that's why I kind of sabotaged it a little bit. I'd do stuff and then not do it, or I'm wondering what it takes to really have that dream like you did, where you said, can I make a difference? What do you think was the foundation for you to have that?
I think I was. I think I was blessed with mentors and role models
Mm,
that saw that
yeah,
and that either nurtured it in me or cultivated it in me, or just by how they lived their life
mm,
exemplified that.
yeah,
Uh, for example, I mean, my father was in real estate for many years. He was and then for most of my life was in fundraising for a small Catholic high school that all of us kids attended, and that
Mm.
I went back and actually taught at for a few years. And his view of using his gifts to further the mission of something
Mm.
was really inspiring to me.
Mm.
And I also saw the underside of working for a nonprofit that didn't value his contribution and didn't compensate him in a way that really was a match for the difference he was making at
Mm.
the school. And he's been gone now for over 5 years, but continues to make at that school from the legacy gifts that he was able to secure for them.
Mm.
And so I think I can think of a handful of other role models that I had in junior high and high school who lived for others, and so I think I had those insights,
Right.
but then needed to balance that with um, being sure that I was making a decent living, that I was contributing to my own retirement, I was contributing to my kids' college funds,
Mm.
and um, so I think that was helpful to me.
Mm.
I I didn't do this early in my career, but at some point in the last 15 years, 20 years, I started doing vision board exercises
Mm.
where I would, and my husband and I often do it around New Year's, where we get a stack of magazines, we get the kids, and we are all cutting out things that we want to have happen in the next year. For
Mm.
for the kids, it's mostly toys that they didn't get for Christmas, or Disneyland or Disney World that we haven't taken them to yet. But it gives us a chance just to dream and talk about, and then
Yeah.
we put them on a board and we move them around, and then at some point put some words around it, and then it becomes a visual image of what we want. And so I think the skill of vision boarding or journaling or um, any sort of personal development exercise that allows you to get in touch with what it is that you ultimately want to do, and what it is that you want your life to look like around the work that you do.
Mm.
I think all of those are valuable, as a way to get centered in what I really want.
Mm.
Um, there's a distinction that I just recently learned that may be helpful here. I've taken some online courses with the Modern Elder Academy. And the
Mm.
Modern Elder Academy is based right now in Baja, Mexico, but they're also opening a campus in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the US. And it's primarily a midlife school for people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s as they transition to a second chapter, or look at, what
So
do
do
I
you have
now
to
want to do that
you have
my
to turn up
kids
in a
are.
yeah, I was gonna say, do you have to turn up in a sports car or something like that because it's a midlife crisis?
No,
Oh, you just said
but they,
midlife, not midlife crisis. Sorry.
yeah, and they're trying to, two of their catchphrases. One is, "Let's stop calling it a midlife crisis, but a midlife opportunity," uh, and the other one is, "Let's take elderly out of our concept of elder." So um, but in one of the courses I recently took with them, Damien, they talked about a job, a career, and a calling.
Mm.
And as they described that, it felt to me like it was a ladder. Like, you start with a job, it works out, you get recognized, it becomes a career, you get really good at it, it becomes a
Mm.
calling. Or maybe you have a career, but what you've always wanted to do was race greyhounds or build houses in for habitat, or whatever. And so that was kind of how I was viewing it. And then I realized in my own life, I love to teach, love to speak. Sometimes it's a job, sometimes it's been a career, and sometimes it's a calling. And I was like, wow, I can be doing the same thing, standing in front of a room, standing in a Zoom classroom,
Mm,
teaching people to write and speak more effectively.
yeah.
But it can fall into that job category because of the compensation or the health insurance or the transaction that I need. It can
Mm,
fall into that career category where I've done a lot of stuff. And every once in a while, it falls into that calling area. And I was like, wow, the same skill could be any of the three for me, depending on my view of it and my interpretation of it.
okay. I love the mentors that you had, and you're talking about that. Because I think about my background, and this is where I'm going to ask you one other question in relation to that. But I just because I look at it, and I've had some really great mentors late in life. I think I had my parents had really great values, which and part of what drove me was about giving back, that kind of thing. Because we would always, my dad and mum were always helping out in various areas with. And we grew up in country town, and I remember we were counting. We would always be counting the money from the footy club, from the event. So that was a good thing to count. Learn a bit of finances, those kind of things. Count the money. And Christmas was always great because we helped prepare for the Christmas party, which meant that my dad went and got to the lolly shop and got these big boxes of lollies, and we got to pack the lolly bags. And the ones where you didn't, because you had a certain amount to go into each one, and when there was leftovers, we got to eat them. So that was always, a nice little reward from that. Um, and and then I think it was probably when my parents split up. There was, I mean, obviously that has an impact, and some of the role models. But I don't. From that period, I remember a couple of teachers that I kind of looked up to. Um, with my parents, I don't know that my dad was much of a role model between that period. I mean, he was my dad and thing, but I think he had. I mean, he had his own issues going through that period as well. Um, and the one thing I look at that's different, this is where I'm going with that, because later on I had some really great role models. But the key difference that I noticed between myself now, if I was going to isolate, what is the fundamental difference? And this is where I would like to get your take on your how you felt about you, was I didn't know that I liked myself back then.
Mm, mm.
Because I was really talented I could do some really amazing things, but then I would always, it was just I don't know if sabotage is the right word, but I didn't value it, and I don't think I valued myself now that I'm talking about it, but I know I didn't like myself compared to what I do now, and I spend a lot of time with my son from an early age, teaching him to like himself, and he's like just this calm guru now. He's great. Does his organizes, he follows my time management thing too, and he's like, he does his homework, it's all done really quickly, and then he's off playing video games, and I'm asking me, and I can't say anything about it because he's done his homework, he's cleaned the bathroom, he's done all this stuff really quickly, and now
Yeah.
he's playing video, and he's getting great marks in school. So it's like, how can I get upset? But that's why I was wondering, from your perspective, if you were to look back at it in your past, where would you rank yourself as far as liking yourself and having? Because I know from my perspective that is is a fundamental difference from when I was younger to what I'm doing now, and certainly how I treat myself is very, very different to how I. That's I think why I had that job ADHD, because didn't really I didn't value my contribution because I didn't think I was worthwhile. So I didn't value the contribution I was making, and it was all about external stuff as opposed to me feeling satisfied with myself.
I do think age or maturity allows us uh, a certain freedom, Damien,
Mm,
to care less about what other people think of us and
mm,
care more about what we think of ourselves.
mm,
And and so I do think that is an advantage as we get further along in life.
mm,
But I think it's more than that.
yeah.
I look back at my own youth, and there was a lot of um, self-hatred is too strong, but
Mm,
um, uh, self-doubt
mm,
and uh, I was not a cocky kid who thought I could rule the world.
mm,
I was a scared kid who did a lot of pretty cool things to hide the fact that I was scared. And so there's an author here in the States, Andy Tobias, wrote a book called Best Little Boy Syndrome.
mm,
And many gay men in my generation, growing up in the 70s and 80s, um, have a similar experience of we were so scared that somebody would figure out we were gay that
mm,
we overcompensated by Eagle Scout, editor of the school paper,
mm,
on student council, and really trying to like be perfect at everything we did, so
mm,
nobody would know what was real underneath. And once I was able to wrestle with those feelings
mm,
and get to a point where I could be like, no, this is who I am, and this is what I bring to the world, and these are my gifts and my talents, and these are my um, uh, mistakes and my flaws. Once I could have that kind of honest self-assessment, then I think I was in a much better place to be able to commit to my spouse and raise our three kids together, commit to my employer in a way that um, had some integrity to it.
mm,
And so I think it took me a while to get past some of that to where I
mm,
liked myself
mm,
and respected the contribution I could make. And even now, in my late 50s, there are still times that a little voice will creep in saying, "Who do you think you are? Or you can't do that." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't heard from you since I was in junior high. Sit down and shut up. I don't need your input right now." But those voices can run deep in us,
yeah.
and we need to have people around us who can encourage us, support us, guide us, that we don't let those voices rule our lives, and we can be that for the people that we mentor, that we are in the companies we run, that are in the classes we teach, that are in our families, and that's the privilege of having received it from others and then be able to give it back to others, give it forward.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that because I mean I was wondering as we're talking about that and sort of that the what we're talking about is firstly finding and then living your dream. And that was the process. And I was wondering as we were talking, well, when I was thinking through it and then listening to what you're saying seems to have confirmed that you really to find who you are you do have to have a really good liking of yourself first. Otherwise it becomes a bit of a pretend in a way,
Yeah,
or there's a bunch of other stuff, but it's unless you like yourself first, I mean, how it limits what you can and can't do or what you're paying attention to is what I'm hearing from what you were saying as well. I mean, because that was my experience. I was doing all this stuff and I love the job ADHD. I was like, because I was so on that train. I just jumped from one thing to the other, and even then when I had although and having a bit of money behind me as well, it helped as well because I could just go, I don't want to do that anymore. I've got the money. I'm gonna quit, and so I retired once and just got bored. So I went back to working again. Um, and yeah, it was only, but it came back to what was truly always there. And that was that component of enjoying helping others.
yeah.
And I know from your perspective, you get a lot of satisfaction in making a difference. And that's something from my side of things. It was, but I could only help others until after I'd helped myself. It's like in an aircraft. You put your mask on yourself first before.
I was thinking the exact same thing. Yeah, that we're not able to provide that for the teams we lead or the
Mm,
firms we run if we haven't taken care of that ourselves. And I think that's a really important distinction, Damien.
'Cause I'm wondering, I mean, you read a lot of books, but and I've read mountains of them, and I don't know that they really get into that. They kind of do talk about it, but I haven't met many that really get into you've gotta really like yourself first before you can that's gotta be your foundation. Before you can go off and talk about how to set goals and, Tony Robbins' "Waking the Giant Within" was something I read years and years ago, and it's all about, rah, 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 which is, all great. It is good, but it's having that time to actually take and reflect. I think I mentioned I've turned into a bit of a Forrest Gump down here at the beach house because, um, I mean, used to have people do that for me, but now I bought a little electric, well, it's a big electric it's a push mower, but it's also self-propelled, and because I've got this great lawn, I'm out there and I'll be out there tomorrow, just going backwards and forwards, no headphones, no nothing, just my own thoughts because that solitude just allows things to go and just wondering how is it something we need more of to help people find, this you need to get for you to find where you wanna be, you actually have to be in a place to be able to find where you wanna be, which is liking yourself. Do we need more of that, do you think, or is there enough out there?
I think I think what you're putting your finger on is that sense of healthy self-love,
Mm,
um, that is not, again, not on one extreme, arrogant, egocentric, it's all about me, narcissism,
yeah.
or on the other extreme, uh, covering up something. Nobody likes me. I'm hated. And so I'm acting as if. But that sense of healthy self-esteem,
Mm,
I do think is a value. I don't know if there are. I mean, I believe there are authors and
mm,
speakers who endorse this and who guide people towards this. Um, but I don't have something that springs to mind as, oh
mm.
yes, go to this
The only
book,
one
go
I
to
can
this
think of
source.
was Wayne Dyer when he talked about in, because it's one of my favorite books that I've read o or listened to
Yeah.
over and over again, he said, "You have to have a quiet love affair with yourself." That's the only one that I
Nice.
can yeah, that's what it said. I love that, but it didn't it took me, I can't remember how many times to listen to it before it actually clicked.
Well,
It
and
doesn't seem to
at
be a
a
sorry, go ahead.
at a more contemporary level, I think the work Brene Brown has done
Mm,
around vulnerability and
mm,
shame and not being our worst
mm,
choice we've ever made. I think her TED talks and her work definitely mirrors this
mm,
in terms of somebody more contemporary than Wayne Dyer.
yeah.
Um, the other person I can think of that's more dated is M. Scott Peck,
Oh, okay,
and
yeah,
some of
yeah.
the stuff he's done in psychology. So I think and I think there are
Mm,
spiritual traditions of centering and self-management. There are approaches in yoga and approaches in healthy physical fitness, healthy nutrition that
mm,
comes down to putting yourself first.
mm,
And so I think there are pathways that would reflect what you and I are talking about,
mm,
but I don't know that it's the dominant conversation in either your society or my society.
yeah.
But one that needs to be amplified and supported for people.
Yeah, okay, that was the question about that 'cause, yeah, I that's what I was getting at. Do we need to that? Because one of the things I've heard recently that it doesn't seem to be a buzzword is where I'm trying to go with it. English is my
Yeah, yeah.
sorry, I'm fumbling around words, but as I say, English is my second language, and I don't have a first one. But because I mean, for me, from what I've seen lately, the latest that I've seen is what's called quantum jumping, which is basically what you're doing vision with the vision board. It's law of attraction, but they've got the buzzword of it's quantum jumping, which sounds really and I just wonder, do we get a little bit? overcomplicate things and miss key points. Because to me, and what I've really, for me, yeah, life is pretty simple if you follow key principles. An example I use is if you if you're on the 22nd floor of a high-rise building, you go out on the balcony and you step off, regardless if you believe in gravity, you will go down. That's just that's the way it's going to work.
Pretty sure, yeah.
um, and from what I've seen, that there seems to be pretty simple principles in life. One, if you want to have a good relationship, like yourself, know what's important for you in a relationship, as in how to relate to someone. Have a clear idea of what that person is like that you'd like to attract, character-wise, and then go out and find that person. If you want money, save a bit of what you earn, invest that money and reinvest that money. That's a simple instruction as well, but very few people do it. And that's where I'm just wondering, from this finding your dream perspective, is it a case of we really need to have more conversation about liking yourself first? That needs to get that foundation right. And maybe I'm on this rant because I went through so much struggle to get there and trying to help other people to avoid that. But it seems to me once because I look at the comparison between myself and my son. I mean, he is so organized, so calm, everything just falls into place. And he has himself organized, and he very much likes himself. And the example of that, he's 14. Now, what 14 do you know where you're going out with your parent
Yeah.
and adult friends, and your dad says, "Oh, you haven't got your phone. Do you want to take your phone because it might be boring for you?" And he goes, "No, I'll just hang out with you guys." I mean, what
Wow.
14-year-old doesn't take their phone, is not strapped to the side of the head or whatever anyway, but he's just comfortable in his own space. And I look at that and ask him, "Well, do you know what you want to do with your life?" And he goes, "No, not yet." And I said, "You're just going to copy dad and make money the way he does." And he goes, "Yeah, that's probably about right." And then that's his response. But he doesn't feel like he needs to answer at 14. He probably doesn't need to. But I said, the only thing I can put down, the key difference between him and myself, is he likes himself. So, yeah.
And do you think, Damien, that in your parenting of him, you have cultivated that self-respect, self-love for
100%.
himself?
That was a
Yeah.
deliberate choice from when he was young, because I knew from my perspective that's
Yeah.
where I missed out. And it was
And
always about character. I thought education, he was behind in education, and I didn't worry about it. Other people were freaking out, but I said, it'll be fine. You can learn education. Character is a different story. You can learn character as well, but it's rare people change. Excuse me. So it was a very conscious effort to, one, like, I think when we were watching the movie June, we laughed when they had the prince dad was talking with the son, and they about whether the son was going to take over the role of the monarchy or whatever they called it in the movie. And the dad turned to him and said, "Son, whatever you choose is up to you. You already everything you need to be for me. You're my son. That's it." And
nice.
we laughed because that was what I've been saying to him for forever.
Yeah. Um, I think I mentioned the last time we were together, my husband is a minister in the
Mm,
unity
yeah,
tradition, which is Christian, but not as dogmatic as some of the Christian um, uh, religions. But one of the elements in his faith that we have taken on as parents is a blessing of our kids, and I try to say it almost every night when I'm putting
mm.
my kids to bed. And it's funny because I just put my 4-year-old to bed right before the podcast, and I was like, "Come on, you got to go to sleep, go to sleep." Um, but is to be able to say to him, "You are the perfect expression of God's
Mm,
love.
yeah, I love that.
Papa God and I love you exactly the way you are."
Mm,
And I didn't hear that growing up.
yeah,
I heard where I was a misfit, where I was a shortcoming, where I needed to do better, what I needed to do differently. And I'm the child of a World War II vet, so
Yeah.
it's very old school. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
No, sir. And even when I mess up, lose my temper, work too many hours, travel too much, whatever it is, I know that every night my kids go to bed knowing they're enough and
Mm.
knowing they're loved.
Yeah.
And if that's all I do in a day, that's a successful day.
Mm.
And I think you're seeing the fruits of the focus you've had with your son for 14 years,
Mm.
that it's coming out that way now.
Mm.
And there may be people listening that are like, but I'm doing all of that and my kids don't want to hang out with me.
He
It
doesn't
will
wanna
come
hang out
around.
with me, that's a different
Yeah.
story. He
Yeah.
doesn't wanna hang out with me. Well, he does from time to I mean, he hangs out,
Yeah.
but that's not what when I say, we went out and he comes along, that's not what he normally
Right.
he hangs out with his friends and stuff, but we'll go and play badminton together and that things like that. But, yeah, generally, he's not hanging out with me every
Yeah.
day.
But I think parenting, I think founding and leading a company and mentoring
Mm,
younger people in the organization, I think teaching, especially at a high school or university or college level where you have long-term interactions with people, I think we sow a whole lot of seeds
mm,
that we don't get to see the harvest of.
yeah,
But the harvest will happen, and I'm committed to that in the mentoring I do and the parenting I do, the teaching I do, that I want that to be able to come to fruition for people.
yeah,
And I want to bring it forth in my own life as well.
yeah. I love that. I think I should clarify too from the perspective because I think a lot of parents get this wrong. But from my side of things, I have this great relationship with my son. I have a great relationship with my dad now as well, which didn't always when I was younger. I was just with my dad today, and we always give each other a hug when we see we're a big group of people with old manly men, and walk up to my dad and just give him a big hug. That's what we do. Um, but the part that I want to clarify with that too for people listening is that I'm a parent first. I don't even think of myself as my son's friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has friends. I'm his parent. I'm there to guide him. Yes, we can joke about things and we do and stuff like that, but I'm always his dad. And I still call my dad dad. I'm 50. My dad's 70. What is he? 70 something. And he will always be dad. I'll never call him by his first name because he's always my dad. Um, so that was I just want to clarify that because some people I know
Yeah.
you get that with parents like, oh well they don't talk to me. And it's like, well, firstly, if it's a boy, it's probably not going to happen anyway. You're right. They will talk to you. Just give them space, and they'll eventually talk
Yep.
to you. My son's sort of kind of a hostage a little bit because we have a bit of a drive from school to home. So when I pick him up and he's stuck in the car with me, eventually something will come out. I just shut up and wait, and eventually it'll
Well,
come.
and the power of we call it windshield time. The
Mm,
power of being in a car,
mm,
looking forward.
mm,
You're not having direct eye contact.
yeah,
You're both looking forward at the road, but you're there side by side,
mm,
and great opportunities for conversation. I love how you say you just let it unfold, let it happen. Um, my dad is gone now, but
mm,
some of my favorite times with my dad from it's funny because I tell my son, from
mm,
4 year old, from when I was 4 years old, and I would travel with him to when he was in his late 80s,
mm,
and we would still take trips together, and it was about being in the car together, and sometimes we'd talk and sometimes we'd just be in silence, but there's something about that, not having the direct eye contact, but that
mm,
proximity with each other, that
mm.
stuff comes up, stuff bubbles up.
Do you think that's more of a male thing? Because I look at it, and you mentioned that because as you were talking about that, I have that with my dad. I remember there's a couple of circumstances like that. One time we're walking home from the scout hall, and I was only really little, and I was trying to match the length of his steps because I wanted to
Yeah.
be like him, and it was like I was trying to match that. And another time we were out the front of the house playing cricket, and he was just chasing me around trying to get, I was trying to run away from him. And there was another one where we were working. He was building a shed out the back, a new shed, pull down the old shed, and we're working, and this is probably why I turned into a workaholic, because we're working, and I was getting tired as I was shoveling, and I looked at him and said, "I'm so tired. Don't you get tired, Dad?" And he goes, "No, I don't get tired at all." And I was like, from that moment, I wanted to be like my dad and not get tired ever. But
Too
do you think that
funny.
it's that? Do you think, because I have that with a number of mums that I talk to, and they're always talking, because my son goes to a boys' school, so when I'm talking with the mums, it's always, "Oh, he doesn't talk about his day," and I'm like, "Well, he's a boy, of course not." I
Yeah.
don't talk about my day. I mean, I talk on these podcasts, but generally at home, I don't really talk about my day much. It's just, do you
I,
think?
I, I don't know that I can answer that. I
Yeah.
do know with my own parents, I had a friendship with my dad and a friendship with my mom,
Mm,
and they were different relationships.
mm,
Uh, and particularly as I became an adult, they were, and my parents were married until my mom passed, and then several years later my dad did. But they were very separate individuals,
mm,
and so I had a distinct relationship with each of them, and uh, I I don't have the same memory of car trips with my mom,
yeah.
but I do have memories of other things we did together.
Mm,
Art shows we'd go to, or she loved film and she loved theater, and
mm,
so things we would go to and we'd discuss afterwards. And so I think as a parent, it's finding what is that moment or that
mm,
experience we can share with our children, and it's also I don't want to say it goes both ways because it's not the responsibility of the child, but it's finding out the things that the child is interested in and intrigued
mm.
in, but it's also saying, "Hey, this is something I'm doing. This is important to me. You want to join me?"
Yeah.
And being open to both of those. Um, my two younger children, my son is 4, my daughter is 7, and then we also have a 24-year-old that
Mm,
we adopted at 16 from foster care. So he
mm,
really was only with us the last 8 years,
yeah.
but not the first 16 years of his life. But with all three of them, I try to do at least one thing a month that is just me and them.
Mm.
And I started it thinking it was for my 4-year-old, my 7-year-old. My 24-year-old is the one who holds me accountable to it.
Yeah.
And now he doesn't call me dad. He calls me JD, but he's like,
Yeah.
"Hey JD, we haven't done anything for January yet. What are we gonna do?" And we'll go see comedy, or we'll watch the Super Bowl, or
Mm.
he came to watch me teach, and we went out for lunch afterwards. And so, but
Oh, that's awesome.
he values it
Yeah.
more than even the little kids do. But I think we've got to find, and as partners, we have
Mm.
to give that to our wife or our husband, that there is space built into the family for that one-on-one time for each parent with each child. I believe it's really important.
How is it like when you went and you talked about he came and watched you teach. What was that like? Because yeah. What was that like for you, and what was that like for him?
Well, he's done it a handful of times, and he
Mm,
always enjoys it. We first started doing it, he was younger than the students in the classroom. Now he's older than the students in
mm,
the classroom. But this was a particularly a fun experience because I was invited in as a guest speaker in an engineering class, chemical engineering class, on the value of storytelling
yeah.
and why it's an important career skill for us to have. And I actually told the origin story of Toby coming into our lives. And
Mm,
so it was neat to be able to tell that and have him there
yeah.
to experience it. But then when the students all broke up and told their own stories he paired up with one of the PhD students in chemical engineering, and they had a great conversation and told each other stories. And
Mm.
so it was good for him in terms of being a little bit in the spotlight, but then also just being able to get the experience the other students were having.
Yeah, I was interested to hear that, because I had that a similar experience today. As I mentioned, I appointed to a CEO role for a radio station, and how that came about was it was in a bit of difficulty. my dad got appointed to the board, and then he was telling me about it. It was just through him that I heard about it. And then I put a proposal to them. I said, well, yeah, then they've never had a CEO before. And I said, well, I've got all this experience, and I think I can turn this around and develop that, and help you move forward. And it was all about helping, but there's also strategic advantage for me to doing as well. But that wasn't the motivation. Yes, it's a side thing, and I will maximize that because it helps even more people. But today when we had a get together, and it was the first time they've done this where we got everyone together, and there was a new chairman appointed as well. So the chairman was there giving a speech. I gave a speech, but it was interesting, that dynamic, because my dad was there, and
Huh.
it wasn't I wasn't doing it for his approval, but I know I stepped up my performance of what I was doing because I really wanted to do a really good job. Because and I said, I'm not doing it, so it wasn't for his approval, but I wanted it to be really special for him. So it
Yeah.
wasn't like that's where I'm getting to. I wanted him I wanted it to be special for him. I wasn't looking for him to be proud of me, and he didn't say anything to me about the speech afterwards. And I wasn't looking. I didn't look to him to say, did I do a good job? I knew I did a good job. I didn't have to ask anybody. Um, but it was interesting how that I stepped that up a little bit because I wanted it to be special for him, um, as well as everybody else. But it was amazing how it went that little bit higher for him, because I do a lot of speeches, and I always want to make it special for the audience, and I get that feedback. But it was interesting that today that I just stepped it that little bit more. And I'm linking this back to the living the dream that we're talking about when we do all these different things. And that's where I'm wondering, is it coming full circle when you really like yourself, that really there's lots of things you can do, but it's that connection with the people. That's why I'm asking about your son, whether that's really what living the dream is, because you're teaching and you've always loved teaching, but then to have your son there and him and to connect with it. It's not about impressing each other or getting your approval,
Right.
but about just having that connection. What are your thoughts on that when you think about it?
Yeah, I think it it's almost, I think what I described and what you're describing, it's almost a form of intimacy
Yeah.
that that the two of you are having an experience in a group of 20, 30, 40 people,
Mm,
but there's a long-term connection there, and
mm,
a respect and a love and this shared experience. So there's an intimacy that the two of you have
yeah.
that the rest of the room doesn't fully get. They don't fully get let into.
Yeah.
And I think those are privileged moments.
Mm,
Um, and I uh, and I love that I'm able to share what's important to me and
mm,
have him be a part of it, but also that I'm able to lift him up a bit and highlight and spotlight him. And so I think there's a mutual benefit, from
mm,
those moments. And I think we need to look for in our lives, in our careers, when those can happen,
mm.
and not try to force it. Like, it's great when it occurs,
Mm,
and it's also great to, grab a burger and a beer and talk about the football game.
yeah. It's interesting that because I wanted to get your take on that, because it said that happened today. Just coincidentally, it's lined up with
Yeah,
us talking what we're talking about. And it's because we are talking about finding a dream, and I think we've really hit on that. With to find your dream, you really have to like yourself to start with. You have to have that good
yeah,
foundation to really
yeah.
understand what that is. But then living the dream, it's like, what is that dream? And I was wondering whether that is the commonality about this living the dream. Is it's not about the physical, I'm using the word, butchering the language, sorry, physical thing that you're doing, but it's more about that connection that you have with people while you're doing it. Whether it is, father, son, or mother, daughter, or any parent and child, um, or the people around you. Because I know, I mean, I went to, well, I'm still a member of Toastmasters, there's a local club here that I don't need to be there, but I like going to support them. That's why I go, not because I do plenty of speaking. I don't, it's not, but it's more
Right.
I want to support them and help them, and I get such joy out of doing those talks with them, but also too in helping them. There's a new girl coming in that started at the last meeting that we're at, and being able to, I actually evaluated her speech and being able to give her feedback and help her. And she was, wrapped in it. It was just really lifting her up. She felt, we could see it, and she was really inspired. And it wasn't just about her; it was about the feedback for others. And I'm wondering, when we're talking about living the dream, is it because we have this thing of living the dream of, having the house and the car and all that kind of stuff, which is nice. I can 100% guarantee, you know, taking a helicopter from Nice to Monaco is a fantastic experience. I've loved doing it, and I will never say that that's not a good thing to do. But that doesn't compare to that experience that I had today, to that experience that I had, helping the young lady with the speeches. Um, is that really what we are chasing when we're talking about living the dream?
You, for me, as I listen to the conversation we've had and reflect on it this evening, I agree what you said about to find the dream. First step is like yourself, and
Mm,
then explore,
yeah.
look, um, try on lots of stuff.
Mm,
That's to find the dream. To live the dream,
mm,
I agree with part of what you said, but I think there's more than that.
yeah.
Part of what you said was it's that connection to community
Mm,
or connection to people. And
mm,
I think that's an important aspect of living the dream.
yeah.
I can't cite the research exactly, but one research study that was done here in the States about people with longevity, they
Mm,
looked at all of the factors of longevity, and was it diet? And you could find somebody who ate only meat and somebody who ate only vegetarian, and somebody who smoked and somebody who didn't, and somebody who drank and somebody who didn't, and they all lived to be 100.
mm,
But the one commonality of this particular study was
mm.
that those who lived the longest happy lives had a connection to a community.
Ah,
Now, that could be the small town that you grew up in. That could be the apartment building on 85th in Amsterdam where you lived, 40
mm,
years of your life. That could be your temple. That could be the high school that you graduated from. You stay connected, but there's a connection to community, and
mm,
so I think that's really captures everything we've been talking about, whether it's where
mm.
we're employed or our family. It's that sense of connection.
Yeah.
And I also think living the dream is letting go of an attachment to the results,
Mm,
letting go of an attachment to what it has to look like.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I do the vision board, but what's on my vision board is, you know, not things, but
Mm,
experiences and feelings. Like I want more serenity. I
yeah.
want to I want to write and publish my second book. I want to make a difference with
Mm,
people who honor the contribution I can make. Those are the types of things that show up on my vision board.
mm,
Uh, and and so it's I don't know, like I don't put a specific name of a company or name of a client that I
mm,
want to work with, but I describe the types of work I want to do, the types of clients I want to serve, and then see who shows up and see
yeah.
who I can do it with. So I think it's both of those, Damien. It's both having the love and the support of a community and a contribution into
Mm,
the community, just like you do in Toastmasters, and it's being active towards pursuing my dream, but not being attached to what it has to look like.
I love that. That's awesome. Yeah. So really Yeah, I can't sum it up any more than that. That's beautiful. I'm gonna leave it at that, JD. You've hit the for me, you've hit the nail on the head. I love that. You've filled it out completely. Um, yeah, thank you. I know you've got
Ah,
a meeting to go to, so I don't wanna hold you up too much, but that really, for me, summed that up. I mean, again, I've been struggling with that, trying to work out, okay, how does that all fit together and have those experiences, and you've really, you know, for me, yeah, it's just really clarifying that about starting with, well, one, who you are and liking yourself, or liking yourself and then who you are. But I love that, how you're having that connection with community and not being attached to the outcomes, but just going along with, with the experiences as opposed to the outcomes. I love that.
yeah.
That's awesome.
I appreciate the invitation to have these conversations every few months, Damien. And it was it was worked out inside of our conversation. Like
Yeah.
I had to write some things down at one point to
Mm.
capture it, but it wasn't like I came into this conversation with a 3-point formula for how to write better headlines.
But
But
that's the point.
inside of it, inside of the discussion, we hit on something and we could align around it that
Mm.
is, I believe, helpful for both of us. And I really hope helpful to the listeners that are part of your podcast community.
Yeah, I think I mean, and from my perspective as well, that's part of what the whole point with the radio opportunity was, because there's a national syndication there, and now it's ironic. I've talked to with a couple of people, and I know there's some people internationally that want to have that connection. We can create a world network
Nice.
of things to share on. So maybe that's something we can discuss about in the future as well. But JD, I said no. I could, we could talk forever. I know, but it's
Um,
so much fun talking with you and so inspiring. Thank you very much for sharing that. I'll let you get on to your next appointment because I know you're busy.
Absolutely. Thank you for the chance, and I look forward to our next conversation whenever that takes place, Damien.
Thank you for being part of the Share.care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes for others and for you.